Hey, gang, time to talk Big Ten football. Huskers, UCLA, USC.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. It's a big one. We got a good one today. We'll break down the Huskers 2024 schedule, 2025, and a little bit of the history between Nebraska and UCLA and Nebraska and USC. First, if we can, we'd like to thank the folks from Birddogs. Mark Onweiler, let them know about Birddogs.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by Birddogs. Now, Birddogs are the shorts that are designed to make you look good. They're stretch khaki shorts, fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg to give you a truly sculpted look. They do the exact same thing as those more expensive brands, but they fit way better. They're not made of that stiff, restricting cotton. They fix the issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches, so you get that slimmer fit that everybody wants without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs uses anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all year long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take the Birddogs off, I promise you. DP, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Much appreciated. Again, we thank you every day as you folks who hang out and get this content each and every single day. We appreciate you hanging out with us. And, of course, the news. The news is the 2024 and 2025 schedules have been released, or at least the matchups have been released. And some of the direction of the Big Ten Conference, the new Big Ten Conference, not only in member new, but in the breakdown, the lack of divisions, one conference, all the teams, one conference. And to pay attention, we have to now pay attention to some of the matchups and the breakdown of how this is going to work. It appears that each school, each program got to suggest, in air quotes, who their protected annual matchup would be. Nebraska and Iowa seemed like the natural fit. The word rivalry has been bandied about, but here's what I would say. I think it was a marriage made long prior to this beginning of new Big Ten football. UCLA and USC becoming members allows us to talk a little bit about who the rivalries are. Border rivals, USC, UCLA, within driving distance. Same for Nebraska and Iowa. Some of the other protected games made sense. And then the pairings, because you wanted to split UCLA and USC and who would face them each year. And then who gets year one of these matchups. And in year one, I mean, Nebraska found out pretty early that in the first year of the full new Big Ten Conference, they would be traveling to Los Angeles to face UCLA. And that year two, you'd get USC, but USC, you got to go to USC. Oh, which means year three, UCLA comes here. Year four, USC comes here. Got to make sure everybody gets seen. Got to make sure everybody gets hurt. But in 2024, Nebraska will go on the road to Iowa. They'll go on the road to Northwestern, Penn State, Purdue, and UCLA. And we don't know what the matchups are going to be when it comes to personnel type, level of program, standard of program. We don't know those things because that's 2 years. We've got to reintroduce ourselves to Nebraska football through Matt Rule and whatever it's going to be. We don't know, is this passing Nebraska team, running Nebraska team, physically aggressive? We don't know. We also don't know that about several other programs. But we do know that in 2024, Nebraska will travel to Iowa for the Black Friday game. They will travel to Evanston. They'll go to Penn State. And it's been a while. It's been a while. And then in some of these matchups, we got to circle that Penn State wasn't matched up. No natural rival. Rutgers and Maryland. I would have thought maybe Maryland. Or to say Minnesota, but no. That's not a natural. But that's all in play. Coming to Lincoln in 2024, Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Now, some would say, wonderful, good. But not in 2024. Michigan does not exist in that space. USC does not exist in that space. Ohio State does not exist in that space. That's 3 big programs in the Big Ten Conference that will not be on Nebraska's schedule in 2024. Circle that. That's important. Year 2 of Matt Rule, and he will not have to face 3 of the big monsters of the Big Ten Conference. In 2025, they will travel to Maryland, go to College Park. They'll travel back to Minneapolis, as they're doing this year. They will travel to Columbus, Ohio, and they will travel to Los Angeles for USC. There's one other big conference, probably a neutral site game, maybe a neutral site game of a Power 5 that you can pair up with, maybe Colorado, since you're going there this year, that maybe you head there next year or the year after. But traveling into Nebraska in 2025, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Rutgers, UCLA. First 2 years, they get UCLA in both years. Minnesota in both years. You get Iowa in both 2 years. And that's it. Those are the only constants in 2024 and 2025. There's some method to it. Each team has to play or should be will face each other every 4 years, 4-year rotation, but one matchup being secured. So that sets the table for breaking down and looking at some of the matchups, because Nebraska and UCLA, they have some history. These are 2 of the blue blood programs in college football. And I wanted to compare some of the key numbers so you get a full vantage of the 2 programs. USC is second in national championships combined. 11 championships. 11 championships in 131 years. That's second best in the entire country. Nebraska's 11th, 5 national championships. Conference championships, Nebraska's won 46 conference championships, which is second in the country. USC, a little bit different, 37 conference championships, which puts them 5th amongst all teams. Winning percentage. Who do you think has the better winning percentage? Well, it's USC, 60.696, with Nebraska at 681. Nebraska 10th, USC 8th. Bowl games. Again, those measuring things that we like to throw up and put in front of everybody. 54 bowl games for USC, which is 6th in the country. 53 bowl games for Nebraska. Nebraska was ahead until recent drought. Time to correct that, Matt Rule and company. But 54 to 53 is one of their wins, all-time wins. Nebraska is 8th with 912, And USC is 11th with 867 all-time wins. Greater bowl success, that belongs to USC, having won 34 of 54 bowl games. And Nebraska actually one game under 500 bowl games. Another thing that you must fix, Matt Rule. Consensus All-Americans. And remember, we've had on this podcast the breakdown of consensus versus unanimous. But fourth, USC is fourth with 84 consensus All-Americans. Nebraska is ninth with 54. So a 30 All-American difference. That's substantial. That's pretty substantial, quite frankly. And maybe in a future episode, I'll go down what that's been over the last 20 years, because I would think that some of that gap in difference is the last 20 years. 6 Heisman winners for USC, which is fourth. 3 Heisman winners for Nebraska, which is sixth. NFL draft picks. 524. There's only one other program that's had more NFL draft picks than USC, that being Alabama. But USC is second. Nebraska is 11th. 368 NFL draft picks. Again, another thing on Matt Rule's list of things to fix. 85 first-round NFL draft picks for USC, 34 for Nebraska. Time in the AP poll, 803 weeks for UCLA, 730 for Nebraska, and then 91 weeks at the AP number one position for USC, 70 weeks at number one for Nebraska. I give those numbers for perspective, just to have some idea about what it is that's coming into this conference. We'll throw it to break. When we come back, we'll dive into that pool for UCLA, Nebraska, and UCLA. We'll talk about that when we come back to Locked On. Hey gang, DP here, and once again I'll ask you, if you have not subscribed to Locked On Huskers, please pause and do so. Greatly appreciate it. As we go through the new additions to the Big Ten Conference, a big part of it is just side by side, apples to apples, as much as possible. And yeah, it's a little bit different to play in the Big 8, Big 12, Big 10 versus Pac 8, 10, 12. Different levels, different styles of play, different exposure. There's some interesting things that we've had to discuss over the course of the last few days about what it would mean for UCLA and USC to travel to the East Coast. It's one thing to travel to the Midwest, but to travel to the East Coast, they have to go to Maryland, Penn State, and Rutgers. And then, Columbus is still a jaunt. Chicago is still a move. But what if we ask the question, what time are those games? Is because you have the West Coast teams, are those 2:30 games, or are those 12 noon games, 11 o'clock Central Time games? And if you're doing that, if you're going to put USC and Penn State in Happy Valley, that's a primetime football game. That's an 8 o'clock game. Circle it. Can't imagine that you would put that in the afternoon either. UCLA and Penn State, maybe 2:30, but probably that's a night game. Rutgers and Maryland. I'm not sure that Rutgers makes the 2:30 time slot. And out of fairness, you asked the question, how does that rank? How does that fall? If you're the Big Ten Conference, do you feel comfortable with that? USC is a blue blood, pure football program. They're in the elite space. Even now, not having won a national title recently, still in that elite, again, second in several key categories. But for the sake of the conversation, I wanted to break down UCLA. Where do they stand? And some said USC wanted to be the Pac, wanted to be the Big Ten, but you needed UCLA in order to get USC. Okay, if that's the case, then you've got to measure UCLA and then figure out exactly what that means. So if you want to compare, again, we'll do what we did in the previous segment, and we will compare some of the key vital numbers. Again, most of these numbers will swing and sway heavily towards Nebraska. And for point of reference, think if Nebraska's the bigger brand, and if they travel to Maryland, what time are they playing? Well, the same can be said and asked about UCLA and USC. That's why I'm doing the side by side. So you can kind of see that not all things California are equal and the same. Nebraska, again, being being 10th, ranking 10th in all-time record. UCLA, nothing to feel sad about, but they're 36. That's the thing. One national championship versus Nebraska's 5. 17 conference championships compared to Nebraska's 46. 37 bowl games. They're still in the top 25 in those numbers. Like, that's a top 25 number. But compared to Nebraska's 53, Nebraska's 9th, UCLA is 25th. 622 wins all time compared to Nebraska's 912. And that is a big jump. That's a big deal. Nebraska's 8th, UCLA is 61st. Bowl record, 4 games under 500 for UCLA. 1 game under 500 for Nebraska. Neither one of them is happy with their post game, with their bowl games. But Nebraska has been in 53 bowl games to 37 for UCLA. Consensus All-Americans. I was curious about this and was trying to measure it before I looked and actually looked to see what the numbers were. But again, Nebraska with its 54 consensus All-American, they rank 9th. UCLA ranks 12th with 41. A little bit of surprise there. 1 Heisman winner for UCLA and Gary Beeben. They've had talent at UCLA, but 1 Heisman. Heismans just aren't difficult. UCLA kind of cornered the market on it there in California. 337 NFL draft picks, which is 15th compared to Nebraska's 11th. Much closer than I would have expected. 34 first-round NFL draft picks for the Huskers. 36 for UCLA. 36. I'm absolutely 100% surprised by that. 548 weeks in the polls compared to 730 for Nebraska, and then 7 weeks in the entire history of UCLA football. They have been sitting at number 1 7 weeks, which doesn't seem like much compared to the 70 of Nebraska. Nebraska's 7th, but UCLA is still in the top 25. Like, teams just don't get there. They don't get there. So, listen, the numbers set the table for how we look at these programs. We know the numbers up and down the Big Ten Conference, but I think the big story is going to be, 1, the pairings, the choice to separate UCLA and USC. Who would you match them against? It seemed like in year 1, for year 1, they sent one group, and then year 2, they sent another group. So imagine that USC, UCLA weren't in the same bracket. Michigan, Ohio State, because you didn't want everybody to play both years, right? Every year. Nebraska got USC and UCLA both in the first 2 years, so that's a little different. I would think that Nebraska and Iowa were on opposite sides of decision-making. Wisconsin and Penn State were on opposite sides. Illinois and Indiana, Northwestern and Michigan State, Maryland, Rutgers, Minnesota, Purdue. You'd think that at some point they all were on opposite sides for balance and equity. But programs change, Talent levels change, coaches change, so that can change as well. But that is at least the pin that we put in it right now, as we now know who the opponents are for 2023, 2024, and 2025. We don't have the dates for those last 2 years, but it'll be interesting to see when you send USC to Maryland and Ohio State. You send USC to Lincoln in November? When does Nebraska want to go to California? Don't you want to go when it's cold? When it's cold here but warm there? And is there a disadvantage to giving up that game and going in September? But you save some of those for primetime television. So I would think having USC go to Ann Arbor in November, but not before they play Ohio State, because you need to protect your money. Big Ten, y'all have fun. Y'all have fun. We'll put a pin there. We'll come back. We'll close out. I need to talk about these two All-Americans in Nebraska track. We'll do that when we close out. Hey, gang. Again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Appreciate you every day for hanging out as we've danced the dance of Big Ten, the new Big Ten. Do they actually change the name to the actual number of teams? Would that just make sense before somebody else does it? Or are you saving that name for your super conference later on, when it's the real Big 16? It's the real Big 14. But that's for another podcast. That's for another. I'm laughing because I'm imagining the race to week 0, kickoff game of the year, since you can't put UCLA or USC and Ohio State on Black Friday or Thanksgiving, that you put them week 0 as your kickoff for the entire season, and you go full national TV. Hey, look at the new Big Ten. Look at us, look at us, look at us. And do that on week 0, because if you don't, then the folks down south may put together that Texas A&M, or that Oklahoma, Alabama kickoff classic that interrupts all of the traffic and flow. But Big Ten, again, you do you. Y'all have fun with it. It's going to be, the schedule is going to be crazy. I'd say Nebraska's more excited about USC than UCLA. Yeah, I think that would be. And we're going to do a podcast soon over volleyball and basketball, what all this means for volleyball, basketball, softball. What does UCLA and USC mean? Because it's going to get interesting. I wanted to close with celebrating two Huskers. The Lady Huskers had quite the evening at Nationals. Rema Odebor winning the javelin. Junior from the Bahamas won the javelin gold medal. First year as a Husker, broke her own school record, and she's a sophomore. It says she's a junior, but this is her second year. We'd like to give her an extra year. And Axelina Johansson is actually a sophomore. Won the gold medal in shot put, finished second in the indoor championships earlier, third in the outdoor championships last year. They are the first Husker women to win NCAA titles since Dace Ruskell in 2006. So to Axelina and Rema, bravo, well done. And for you, we'll do what we always do. This week, it's in honor of you. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. And for those national championship winners, we will close with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.